this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. There's quite a number of snack foods out there that I don't care for. I guess everybody could say that. Any number of things that just don't quite seem natural. A lot of the chips, and I can eat them. I'd like to eat them, but I look at them. I look at a Cheeto, and I love Cheetos, but I just know they're not real. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe even a Dorito. I love Doritos, but I can look at them and say, that's not a naturally occurring thing. It's not like even a sliced potato chip. I guess my preference is anything you have to shell. I love nuts, pecans in particular. I don't say pecan, even though I'm from the South. Us others in the South say pecan, and like pecan pralines. But I've always liked almonds for some reason, particularly if they're highly salted. There's something very satisfying. But you know something interesting about almonds? Almonds are actually associated with something that's quite lethal. Many people don't know this. I'm going to drop a little knowledge on you here. If, in fact, you were to walk into a room and there's a dead body there, and you get a whiff of what people refer to as, I've heard it described as sour, rotten, or burnt almonds, turn around as quickly as you possibly can. Because if you don't, there's a high probability you're going to be exposed to cyanide. Coming to you from the beautiful campus of Jacksonville State University, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Brother Dave, you know what? I think a lot of people would be shocked because it's such a movie cliche, device, whatever you want to say, that you would assume that I've probably worked a lot of poisons. Did you know that poisons most of the time are certainly the exception and not the norm? I think that there's this thing that's kind of this aura that's built up about the utility of different poisons, right, and being able to slip them into, we famously have covered this mushroom case out of Australia, and that thing seems like it's gone on and on and on, and it's finally reached a conclusion. Of course, those were death cap mushrooms there. And we have previously talked about, Anjette Lyles, the case from the 50s. Yep. You remember that? She owned the restaurant and was poisoning with ant poisoning, was poisoning her family. But, when it comes to cyanide, I think maybe I have had two cases, only one of which was a homicide. The other was as a result of somebody being exposed in a farming setting, where they were cyanide is actually used.
Well, now wait a minute.
It's used for
what do you use cyanide for on a farm? I have heard this before, but
they're used. It's used in poisoning. For various types of
weeds and stuff,
varmints that are about. Yeah, well, not just weeds, but particularly when it comes to rat poisoning, those sorts of things. And there's a lot of different compounds. But
is cyanide something arsenic is something found in rat poison? I remember Marie Hilley, Anniston, Alabama, the Black Widow, and using arsenic.
Yeah, arsenic and old lace. Yeah,
but cyanide, whenever I think of cyanide, I think of movies that feature Nazi spies, and they whenever they get caught, they pop a tooth out and they scrunch down on a cyanide tablet, and foam comes out of their mouth like they chewed up an Alka-Seltzer, and they die that quick.
Cracking the tooth open and getting that.
And that's what. How many of the Nazis after the war and before the trial?
I don't know. Famously. And I still have yet to get to see this movie, and I probably ought to because I love World War II. The Nuremberg thing that's come out with Russell Crowe lately, and he plays what's his name?
Goering,
the guy that was in charge. Goering, he plays the head of the
big fat guy.
And, he cheated. He cheated the hangman the day before he was sentenced. He had cyanide. Cyanide
that's what made me think of it.
I think. Yeah, and a lot of those guys knock themselves off that way. It's highly effective.
But with Goering, he a very quick aside. Hermann Goering was a World War I flying ace, but then much like Adolf Hitler and the rest of that upper echelon of crazy, wacko, nut job Nazis, they all became under the care of the same doctor who had them all tripping on amphetamines, cocaine, and he had every narcotic drug known to mankind at the time. Those guys were taking it, because towards the last 6 months of the war, you got Adolf Hitler shaking so bad, and he looks like he's 80 years old when he's only like 55. Hermann Goering was the size of a whale. And, anyway, that.
And you would think, being on all the stimulants, that his metabolism would be so peaked that he sat
down at the table and ate like, Louis the 15th or whatever, one of those, where you see him with the big mullet in their hand. But
don't get him near a dessert cart. He'll destroy it.
He'll eat the cart and spit out the wheels. But now the thing that gets me about cyanide is it something that is that small of a dosage you could have it in a capsule in your mouth that you really could just crack it and die?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that lethal. Yeah. And,
wow.
Particularly if there's a direct inhaling of it or certainly ingestion of it. It's a nasty substance. Here's something interesting. That's the reason my opening was like this. The cases that I worked, all right, now just, kind of let this seep into your groundwater a little bit. The cases that I worked with the same doctor, the same forensic pathologist, all right, and we knew that we had a cyanide poisoning or somebody that had been exposed. And I remember being it's one of these things, there's not too many times I was ever afraid in the morgue. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a lot of people will say, well, there's dead bodies in there. No, I was never afraid of dead bodies. I was afraid of certain agents and diseases. I remember, I'll give you an example, and doesn't have anything to do with cyanide poisoning, but just so people understand what it's like. I had a guy that was 24 years old. He died within 24 hours of his first presentation at the hospital, had a headache where initially he complained he thought his head was going to explode. And he had meningococcemia, and it's highly the level of lethality is off the charts. All right. And it can be spread. And I remember the doctor telling me specifically, you've got to be careful when we're going to do this case. Okay. And this kid, his body was so fresh when we got him from the hospital that his organs were still all warm.
Wow.
It's one of those cases that stands out because most of the time when you open a body, the body is really cold to the touch. We've talked about this in postmortem interval, but yeah, in this particular case, his organs were still warm. And I remember that. And plus he had a fever that was it was raging. I mean, the entire time it's like 103.5 up to 104.
I used to work at 103.7 one time, but that was Joe, the reason we're doing the show today is because we actually have a true life case of cyanide being used as a murder weapon. And I was kind of taken aback. We have a couple, Aleena Asif. She is 46. Her husband, Asif Qureshi, is 53. And they have 3 children, 18, 14, and 7. And they are separated as a couple. And this is one of those things that I fear for people going through a divorce and a separation, because you can't predict the way somebody is going to act, how they're going to respond to different things, even when the relationship breaks down and you've got 3 children that are old enough to understand. In this particular case, we've got the Asif Qureshi is not living in the home. He has moved out, has his own place. Wife and 3 kids all live in the same home. The 18-year-old leaves for school like normal, like 7 o'clock. 7:50, mom takes the 14-year-old to school. Now, she doesn't leave their 7-year-old daughter home alone. She goes with them. Okay. So all the children have gone to school except mom comes back after taking the 14-year-old, and she and the 7-year-old hang out for a little while until it's time for the 7-year-old to go to school. Aleena walks the 7-year-old to school. I'm just thinking of the sweetness of all of this, Joe. I mean, the mom saying goodbye to the college-age daughter. Proud of you. Have a good day. Taking the 14-year-old to school. Proud of you. Have a good day. And then walking with her 7-year-old. Proud of you. Have a good day. When she gets back home, unbeknownst to her, death awaits. In between the time that she took the 14-year-old to school, when everybody was out of the house, her ex-husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, Asif Qureshi, snuck in. So she drops the 14-year-old off, comes home with the 7-year-old. He's hiding in the house, Joe. He's there the whole time. When she leaves to take the 7-year-old to school, he plans and plots. When she returns on her own, that's when he attacks. She returns home just before 9 a.m. He's in there for 2 hours, Joe. And the only thing we know, Aleena is dead.
Well, we know that. And we also know that there was evidence, certainly on her person, that this was not a peaceful passing. It's not like, the angels called, all right, and she's whisked off to the great beyond. This is something, even though there's not, to the best of our knowledge at this point in time, there's not like some kind of indication of violence at the scene, like busted up furniture, all those sorts of things that we commonly associate. And the one thing I think, going back to comments earlier, I wonder, when she's found deceased and you've got law enforcement, and we'll get to how she was found, that are summoned to this location, I really wonder, when they walked in, did they smell burnt almonds?
That's what I was going to ask you, Joe.
Yeah, that's one of the things, with the cases I worked, Dave, the pathologist that I worked with, he could smell burnt almonds, and he described it as burnt almonds. I couldn't tell you what a burnt almond smells like. Do you know that only 40% of the population allegedly can smell the smell? I'm not one of them. I've been around 2 cyanide cases where I could not smell that smell, even though the individuals right before me were dead. And I've often wondered, even if I could smell it, could I actually identify it? Would I be able to appreciate what was there before me? Because when the authorities entered this room, they saw something that certainly wasn't right. They knew that she shouldn't be dead. And at that point, they had no explanation. There are monsters, and then there are monsters out there. There's people that will commit homicides, and they'll do it in broad daylight in front of people, okay? And that in and of itself, I would argue, Dave, is very shocking. If I would think that anybody that has borne witness to someone being assaulted, cut, beaten, or shot in front of them is something that will remain with them forever and ever. But Dave, just imagine for a second, you are absolutely dependent upon your mama. You're at a young age. She helps you with everything, and you return home, or you're not picked up by her at school. There is, first off, that kind of cascading pit of the stomach feeling that you would have when she wouldn't pick you up, because first thing, I don't know, maybe it's my own background in anxiety, you begin to think about the worst has happened. All right. The worst has happened. In this particular case, the school alerted that one of this woman's younger children, they called the older child that was in college and said, nobody came by to pick up.
Well, you know how it is, Joe,
child.
at school. At elementary school, you have the list that every child has, where you have because there are so many issues with families nowadays.
Boy,
that list is followed very strictly. If who is allowed to see the child at school, who is allowed to check the child out, who is allowed to pick up the child, and those might not all be the same. And in this regard, based on the fact that they called the college-age daughter first when nobody showed up to pick up the 7-year-old, tells me that everybody knew there was a situation. And when the college age girl gets that call, she says, call the police now and have them go and do a welfare check.
Boy, yeah, that's very insightful, Dave, when you think about it. And for the very first time, this is kind of coming to mind. Why is this why do you defer to the college age kid? Because they have a father. Why is the father not being contacted? And boy, you talk about flipping the pages on a book and being able to dig in there and try to read between the lines. If you think about that, so you've got a dad that's out there somewhere, but they're separated. Why wouldn't he be the first on the call sheet? As far as like reaching out and saying there's a problem with your child, you need to come and retrieve them. That's not how it works. Here's a question. You're talking about this list. First off, was he even on the list? And if he was on the list, what spot did he occupy on the list as far as priority goes? That's a big tell.
I'm guessing he wasn't on the list, or he would have been the primary. If you have a couple that is separated, oftentimes, so there's always going to be primary custody, and then there's going to be the primary custody with visitation for the other parent, every other weekend kind of thing. And then you have others that only get supervised visitation or none. I mean, and that's dictated by the sheet. You have shared custody, you're on that sheet. You're the first call. If mom's not here, call dad. And that's not what happened. And that's why I'm thinking that, and based on what took place in this entire story, there's reason to believe there were issues in the household. Oftentimes, when the college age girl gets the call and says, get the police out there now to do a check on my mama. Oh, Joe, that just makes you want to cry.
Yeah, it certainly can.
The police got to the house and they found Mama, Joe. And you asked me about this. You asked me about the finding when we were talking about this. And when you think about what happened, Joe, he may have left her, his wife, the mother of his children, to be discovered by his college-age daughter, his middle school son. Anybody could have found their, because obviously she is no longer with us. But thankfully, police were called. Go do a well-being check on my mom.
When she is discovered, though, Dave, and being discovered by the police, they saw a presentation with her that probably gave them pause, because what I'm understanding, is when they observed her deceased in her home, when she's found, Dave, she's got a series of burns that are surrounding her face. My assumption is that in addition to that, knowing what I know about what agents were applied to her, she's probably going to have what's referred to, and this has nothing to do with cyanide, but there's a term called cyanosis. She's going to have a cyanotic appearance to her. And if you'll just think about the deepest, darkest purple that you can, it almost looks like eggplant. Okay. That's the color that we're talking about. Her face, perhaps, would be to this color. What else would be that color? Perhaps her nail beds. You can look at the nail beds and you can see signs of cyanosis. And this goes to an acute respiratory issue. But you combine that, and we know that she's not working in a chemical factory, right? This is her domicile. So I think from a forensic standpoint, a death investigation standpoint, how do you explain you've got a cyanotic woman? Now, normally, if we saw cyanosis in an individual that had no other injuries, we would automatically think that they may be in congestive heart failure or congestive respiratory failure because of an oxygen issue. But you're thinking about her, she's not an elderly person that's infirm at all. Right. She has these burns on her mouth, and this is a big puzzle, from Jump Street.
That's what I was going to ask you, because here, let me give you an example of the way it was described. Okay.
Yeah.
I already told you about how the kids went to school. College girls first,
Yes.
then she takes the middle schooler with the 7-year-old, and then she takes the 7-year-old and walks her to school and comes back home. That's where her ex-husband is hiding in the house somewhere. When she arrives back at that home by herself, the way it is described by the district attorney and by the investigators is that Qureshi comes out of the shadows. He suffocates her by putting a rag soaked in a lethal cyanide mix over her mouth and nose. They also mention acid burns around her face. Now, when I hear something like that, sometimes I know just past experience that not being in the industry of death investigation and understanding how the body changes with different chemicals, something that looks like a burn to me might not look like a burn to you. So when a police officer comes in and finds, bless her heart, she's on the bed, she is found obviously deceased, and I'm thinking about how did they come to the idea that it was cyanide and acid? How do you even come to that conclusion that something was used to suffocate her and it was cyanide? As we mentioned at the start of the show, I thought cyanide was something that came in a pill, you bit it, boom, you're dead.
No, it can be liquefied. It's powder form. There's a number of different statuses that it can be in, and it doesn't take very, very much effort in order to acquire it. I think there's a number of ways. First off, it's pretty tightly controlled.
I was going to ask you, that's nothing you can just go down to Walmart and pick up a bottle, right?
No, this is something that's very tightly controlled, and I really wonder. Most purchasers of the substance have to have some type of permit or a connection with a specific industry where it's being utilized. For instance, like in the metallurgical world, it's used there. And there's a couple of other things. Obviously, in agribusiness, it's used there.
I'm so paranoid, Joe. A lot of times on these, I will research an item. I didn't research cyanide.
Yeah.
Other than under a tree on this particular episode, I did not go, hey, where can I find cyanide? Which I normally would. Where could I purchase X? I didn't do that on cyanide, Joe.
Yeah, no, it would be, it's not a good look if somebody's going to do your history here. And, it's really weird. You can get it from a variety of chemical houses that produce these sorts of things out there that service these industries. The big question is, how do you get your hands on it? Now, exposure to cyanide itself can burn. Okay, it can leave a skin lesion, but Dave, what they're describing here sounds more acidic to me. Can I give you a brief description of what an acid burn looks like?
Please do, because I'm trying to figure out how they knew.
Yeah, well, first off, there's going to be laboratory testing involved in this, but just as far as the external appearance, I actually worked a case, Dave, many years ago where a guy fell into a vat of acid and he died. The weird thing about it is his buddy jumped into the vat to try to save him. And the buddy died about a month later. One of the most horrible cases that I've ever been associated with, I'd say. But what it does is, first off, you'll get this kind of red appearance on the skin. It'll almost look like a really severe third-degree burn where it'll begin to take layers off of the skin. It'll look raw. And also one other thing that's happening, acid is actually used as a dehydrating agent as well. So for instance, if you work in a tannery, like if you're tanning hides and you want to produce leather like really quickly, there'll be an acid application that's used in order to take all of the water out of a sample, for instance. And the skin, interestingly enough, the skin will take on, after a period of time. Let me kind of back up. Humans, when we die, we actually do desiccate. Okay, so desiccate means to dehydrate, to kind of dry up. It's part of like if you have a natural mummification process, like if you look at the mummies that they've recovered down on like those high elevation areas down in Peru where the bodies are perfectly preserved. That's a natural mummification. Well, the water is all extracted from the bodies. Okay. Well, acid speeds that up, but there's an initial burning that takes place. Now, if it were to present externally, not only would the skin appear red, depending upon how long the body had been down. Dave, did you know that skin will begin in the specific contact areas? It'll start to turn brown. It'll turn brown and it will look almost like tanned leather. Okay, now it doesn't sound like she'd been down long enough for that because they were talking about burns around her mouth. But here's the real thing that they discovered when they got her into the autopsy suite. And this is mind-blowing for folks. When they began to examine her mouth, which is something that we do, most people don't realize it, but did you know at autopsy we actually remove the tongue? So we'll go up through the bottom of the floor of the mouth and we will cut out the soft connective tissue along the jaw or within the inner jaw and take out the soft palate. And of course the tongue is attached to that. And you want us to. And we will begin to strip down, taking not only the tongue, but also the organs of the neck and also the esophagus. Why is that important? Well, it's important specifically because of cases like this. As we dissect down, first off, we're going to look at the tongue and the interior of the mouth. If she has gotten exposed on her soft, moist, mucoid surfaces in her mouth, Dave, there's going to be burns there. And they will be vicious. And here's the other thing, she would have been aware of it. She would have felt this pain. Also, if it is aerosolized in any way, you're going to see burns down her trachea. You'll see them all through her airway because of that soft lining that's on there. And you'll see the lining will be highly irritated. It'll be red and inflamed and dependent. And let's just say, and there are cases out there where people have actually ingested acid by directly pouring it down their throat. I don't think I've had one of those cases. I've had people that have taken drain cleaner and it has much of the same effect, this kind of caustic reaction that you have. But this is unusual because, Dave, what they're saying as a result of what they discovered is that it's not necessarily that she drank something. It's that someone held her in place and essentially introduced this substance or compound into her system via a saturated rag. I got to tell you, Dave, I was talking about the meningococcemia case earlier. You know, I wanted to finish that and tell you, did you know that even though the doctor told me to be careful, guess what my idiot self did? I stuck myself with a needle.
Oh, my gosh.
It went right through my glove. And I was trying to be really, really
That's
careful.
why you did it.
And I wound up, they sent me to the hospital. I wound up staying in the hospital for 24 hours. They wanted to see if this thing was going to
Wow.
die. And I was terrified, just laying there. You're kind of waiting, you're waiting to see if you're going to have a fever.
Oh my gosh.
So
I would have been losing it.
And careless on my part. But, with this, one of the things that's very scary about this is people don't think that death investigators are in danger when you enter into an environment, like this. And, earlier this week, we talked about the grave robber up in Pennsylvania. And one of the problems that is going to arise in that case in particular is the fact that they used heavy metals back when they embalmed bodies. And that house that guy had those bodies in is toxic. It's filthy with all of this stuff. So the investigators that went down there would have potentially been exposed to heavy metals down there. This is something else. If the investigators, the police that initially arrived on scene, they're not just around what we believe right now, Dave, I think this is correct. They're saying that it was sulfuric acid that was combined with cyanide application. I'm worried about the investigators that were out there. And did they have any kind of exposure to the cyanide had it become aerosolized in any way so that they could have breathed it in. I'm hoping that is not the case, because, just think passively, Dave, just for 1 second. You're standing there and you don't necessarily perceive that there is a problem. That's why I wonder if there was a smell of burnt almonds. You're standing there and you're looking at this body and you're trying to figure it out, and they've got burns on their face, on the soft tissue, and you're thinking, I wonder what causes this. You're getting closer and closer to the body, and I'm worried that there could be some remnant there that they could have taken on, like these investigators kind of inhaled around this space. Then when you get the body to the morgue, you're also wondering, well, if they ingested cyanide, what's going to happen when I put the cold steel to this body and I open up the body? Now, is there going to be a rush of this coming out of the body? Are we in danger? Is our staff in danger? Most people don't think about that when it comes to death investigation. But Dave, there's actually danger lurking around every corner, at every scene, and with every case.
As this was coming about, the story, the cyanide, I wondered, okay, what are we going to find out? Because reading what the DA said and what the investigators are talking about, I can't imagine, because Qureshi, the husband here, Asif Qureshi, is an out-of-work software engineer. Now, if he's bringing cyanide and something else that he can dip a rag into, I'm thinking, what else did he spill it? Is it somewhere else? Is there a wet rag over here that's waiting to kill the other? All those things were going through my mind as I was reading through this. But hey, you know what? The Paul Harvey, the rest of the story, this guy, Qureshi, actually did a dry run. Did you know that? He actually planned it out so far, Joe, that they have, because now you have pointed this out to me many times on multiple shows, between our cell phones and Ring doorbell cameras and videos everywhere, you're going to get caught. You're going to be found out. Yeah. And in this case, as they researched it, they found out that Qureshi was in the house. Okay. They saw him on video going into the home while his wife had left the house with the 7-year-old. He comes back and he stays in the house until they see him going in. They see her going in, his wife going into the house just around 9:00, and she never is seen alive again. She never comes back out. He comes out of the house at 10:50. He's there nearly 2 hours with her alone. And when he leaves the house, he's got this duffel bag that he went in there with. He walks down the street to a scooter that is tied to a telephone pole, and he gets on and rides off towards his home in Belrose. So when police are investigating, looking at the cameras along the way, they're able to track him, Joe, from the time he got to the house to the time. They had this down in no time, and they were able to go back and look at history and find out that a couple of weeks earlier, before this happened, he did a dry run through where he actually came. He parked the electric bike in the same area, locked it up, walked to the house. In that case, before, in his little his warm up, his practice round, he walks around the house and then goes back to the bike, gets on it, and rides home. He knew how long it took to get from point A to point B, how long he had inside, and what he could do. So he knew everything he could do.
Holy smokes. You talk about a premeditative event.
Big time. And it's all on camera.
Yeah. You know what absolutely baffles my mind? I want to know what was in that duffel bag. Because, and obviously the agent would be in there, but Dave, how do you, okay, this is coming from a place of like, I've got to know, if you're going to be the perpetrator in this, and this is the weapon that you're essentially going to wield, okay, how do you guarantee your own personal safety? Did he have a mask on? Did he have, what kind of protective clothing did he have on? Did he have rubber gloves on? Were his arms covered? Was his face covered? What did he do? Because this thing is sloshing. It's got to be sloshing around. I mean, I guess he could pre-prepare the rags or a rag, place it into a plastic bag of some kind, have it contained. And then when the moment, maybe he didn't have the agent with him in a liquid form. Maybe it was already poured up onto an applicator. And then when he gets her into this position, allegedly, he holds her down and he's in there with her for 2 hours. I want to know if there's any other kind of insults to her body. I want to know if she had some kind of strike to the head. Had he attempted to choke her out? Was there any evidence of restraint on her? Dave, he had literally 2 hours to play with her in that house if he chose to. At what point in time did he present to her in this environment? And we're talking about, from what we're understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, man, that this separation is rather contentious, isn't it? And not to say that most aren't, but, there's some. Right. You've got contentious, then you have contentious, and I'm wondering, did he show up, with intent to torture her by threatening her, or did he say, you can change your mind right now, and she refuses to change her mind about moving forward? Or was he just dead set? It sounds like with all the premeditative factors here, he's dead set on doing this, Dave.
Based on the practice round, it wasn't something he thought of in his lonely hours of the best way to get back at her, and I'm going to do this. People do that all the time. They think about it. But he went much further than just thinking about it. He thought about it. He planned it. Then he did a walkthrough to make sure that it could be accomplished in the time period he needed it to be. And then he did it. He carried it out. So, yeah, I don't know what he did during that time. And I did wonder, Joe, the same thing you did about what was in the bag. Was there some mask? Did he prepare? Did he protect himself from getting it on him? I mean, what form did he use on this rag? Because they make it sound like it was a wet rag put over her mouth and nose, held against it, until she died. And again, I don't know how long that would take or what went into it, but he would have had to have been prepared, correct? He had to have a mask.
Yeah.
And gloves.
And why sulfuric acid? I think because
pain.
Cyanide would be sufficient to the task.
I bet he tortured her with that acid.
That's what I'm thinking too, brother. Yeah. I mean, why else are you going to have to use an agent like sulfuric acid? And maybe all of this is going to, and look, this guy's just been charged. He hasn't, been convicted.
I meant to mention that when we started, because we usually do adjudicated stories, and this is one that's just now happening. And I apologize, but it was such a case where you've got a rag soaked in a lethal cyanide mix that I had never heard of it before. I didn't even know it was possible. I'm big on Breaking Bad. They made ricin, in the meth lab one time, and I didn't know if this was something you could make at home in your garage or if you had to buy it. I didn't know. And there's just too much thought that went into this. Too much.
Well, they claim that you can use raw bitter almonds and create it. And I don't know, is that something that has been attempted on his part? I have no idea. I do know this, that these children are now without a mama, and this father who sired these children is now cooling his heels in a Nassau County jail. I know that this is an absolute horrific way to die. No one deserves to die this way. It smacks to me as though, that there are elements of torture. I know that, from my reading now, that he was wearing black latex gloves, but black latex gloves is not going to prevent you from inhaling something. I wonder if there was anything else that he used, because we know that there was preparation, according to the police, by virtue of them tracking him and watching him on surveillance video. There's going to be more to come. And let me tell you one of the things to watch out for in this case. And if you love true crime and you love forensics, when this thing makes it to case, unless this guy makes it to trial, unless this guy's offered up a plea deal and he accepts, one of the interesting things is that not only are you going to see a forensic pathologist get on the stand and testify in this case, you're going to see probably a forensic toxicologist that specializes particularly in these types of poisons. There's going to be a lot made over tissue samples, because you will be able to microscopically see what this woman went through, the pain that was inflicted upon her, and the effects of both cyanide and sulfuric acid, which is a interesting combination to say the least. There's going to be a lot to unpack here scientifically. But for now, let's wait and see what else develops, because I got to tell you, friends, this is certainly one for the books. Something I didn't think I'd be talking about this week, but I'm glad we were able to get it out to you. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.